Hello and welcome back to AMC Movie Talk for movie fans. I'm your host, Erin Darling, and thanks for tuning into the show where we give you the latest movie news and insight into what it all means. Joining us today, we have our AMC editor, John Campea.
Greetings and salutations, everybody. Myself and Lord Vader welcome you to the show. I got my Sam Crow shirt on. Tonight is the season premiere of Sons of Anarchy. I'm really looking forward to it, getting ready to patch up.
That's right. And also joining us today, we have the lovely and talented triathlete now, AMC Movie News editor, Amy Rose Eisenbach.
Thank you for the warm welcome. Yes, I survived. My triathlon was Sunday, and I really appreciate all the support from you guys and from you fans. Those encouraging words really go a long way. So I didn't drown, and I'm very happy to be on the show with you today. Very sore, though. Very sore.
And we are so happy to have you. So without further ado, let's jump right into the news. As film fans, we've become accustomed to movies being pushed back from their original release dates. However, one of the most highly anticipated films of 2015 just got moved up. Marvel's upcoming film, AntMan, will be the first film in Marvel's Phase 3, rolling out after The Avengers 2. And it was originally supposed to open on November 6, 2015, but it will now hit AMC theaters everywhere on July 31st, 2015. The new date means AntMan will be opening just 3 months after the opening of The Avengers 2, which hits AMC theaters on May 1st, 2015, and just 2 weeks after the opening of the upcoming Batman and Superman movie. AntMan is being directed by Edgar Wright, who also directed films like Shaun of the Dead, Scott Pilgrim vs. the World, and The World's End, which is playing in AMC theaters now. So, John, what do you think about this date change for AntMan?
As a film fan, this is super exciting. Like you were mentioning, this is normally what we're used to hearing, like with G.I. Joe and Pacific Rim and a whole bunch of other films, is that this movie you've been looking forward to, set it off another 6 months. It's pushed further back. This is really cool, but it says something else to me. By moving it from November and moving it just 2 weeks before Batman Superman, it feels to me like Marvel is playing a little bit of chicken with Warner Brothers. And it tells me they've got a lot of faith in this project. They must have an awful lot of faith in it. They've got a great director in Edgar Wright. We still don't know who Ant-Man is going to be played by. Trust me, Marvel and Disney know. They've known for a long time. Mm-hmm. We just don't know yet. But overall, I think this, moving it up, moving it into the hornet's nest when all these other big movies are opening, 2015 is already such a huge year. But I'll tell you the other thing it might mean. Moving it off November might mean that Marvel may be looking at moving another film up into November. Mm-hmm. So it's conceivable at this point, with them moving Ant-Man into July and freeing up that November date, it's possible, however unlikely, to quote Star Wars, that we might see a Doctor Strange in November of 2015. We might see a Black Panther in 2015. I don't know that that's the case. I'm purely speculating, but it does open up a lot of interesting possibilities. Amy Rose, what do you think?
Inconceivable. That's what that just reminded me of when you said that. I just watched Princess Bride over the weekend. So good. The number one thing that I would take with this news is that they have confidence in this film, because July is a much hotter date than November. I mean, Ant-Man is definitely, a hot property, but not compared to the Thors and the Hulks of the world, which, really unite fans and non-fans alike of the comic book lore, because it has really opened up audience with all the standalone films, with the Avengers, with all of that. And Ant-Man, while, we know Hank Pym very well, a lot of people don't know him as much. Now, Edgar Wright, they can also have confidence in him because, The World's End, his last movie, opened to about 38 million, I believe, which is not crazy huge, but it's not a failure on a 20 million budget. It's considered a success, but he still has that cult classic appeal and that name to him. So it's definitely saying to me, we think that he's going to do this property justice. July is a much hotter month for these kind of blockbuster comic book movies. And yeah, it's pretty bold to go 2 weeks after a film that we're pretty confident is going to stay, the Superman Batman movie. Pretty confident that's going to take the #1 spot 2, maybe 3 weeks in a row. So it will be very interesting to see how Ant-Man affects that, because, we've been talking about that film for months and it's not going to stop anytime soon. So I definitely have confidence. And The other thing that definitely brought up, I mean, we've heard that they have 2 or 3 pending titles on the board, a couple of which that they actually slated in release dates. So I would definitely think, you know, a Black Panther, a Miss Marvel film, who knows? Doctor Strange, there's all these names we've tossed around. But that definitely could be a November date, especially, again, building for these second tier in the eyes of, you know, the more popular comic book film fans and stuff. So yeah, interesting news all around. I love Edgar Wright's style. I loved Scott Pilgrim. So I'm really excited to see what he does again with a comic book property.
What a great summer. 2015. Wow. Oh, yeah. We should all just move in to AMC. Let's just, can we do that?
We can do that. We got space.
Move in
epic year.
Never leave. All right. Well, with the original making $585 million at the worldwide box office earlier this year, it was inevitable that the Croods would be getting a sequel. Reports are now coming in that the 3 lead voice actors from the film, Nicolas Cage, Ryan Reynolds, and Emma Stone, are all confirmed to reprise their roles for the sequel. Now, one of the directors of the film, Chris Sanders, said, "There's not much to talk about yet because we've got a big lump of clay and we're forming it as we speak." So, Amy Rose, is it a good idea to have a sequel to the Croods? What do you think about this?
I did not see the Croods. My little 5-year-old nephew wasn't his favorite, and he has great taste in movies. So I'm just gonna say whatever. Obviously, I'm not surprised. Making over $500 million at the box office, and you know, animated movies don't cost nearly as much as some of the other films we talk about all the time, comic book films. So yeah, I'm not surprised at all. I mean, having, you know, A-list talent like that voice, I've said it a couple times on the show that, you know, vocal talents don't entice me that much because sure, it's fun to hear a voice you recognize, and sometimes some of the vocal actors are better than others. But to the actors, it's just an easy paycheck. I mean, they get to get in a sound booth and have a good time and make these animated characters come to life. And for like 3 days of work, they get a pretty nice, sizable paycheck. So I really get it from their perspective, and it's got to be kind of fun to create it. But yeah, I'm not surprised about the success. These movies always do exceptionally well because it crosses generations. It brings the families in, and you know, parents like it too because it's also filled with a lot of adult humor a lot of the time. So yeah, I'm not surprised at all that they're making a sequel.
It's a no-brainer that you do sequel to this one with the money that it generated. Now, it was a very expensive film to make. I mean, make no mistake. But at $550+ million worldwide, you're talking, I mean, significantly bigger numbers than Pacific Rim. You're talking about like significantly bigger numbers than a lot of big blockbusters. So on that level, no-brainer. But also, you know what? This was a really interesting little film. It's nowhere near the level of Pixar's classics. It's not an Up. It's not a Ratatouille. It's not a Toy Story. It's none of those films. But it visually, it was a really well put together film. Visually, it's actually, pardon me, its use of color, its use of quote unquote virtual camera work. It was a really beautiful film to look at. I also thought it was actually kind of funny. Let's put it this way. It was a much better film than I was anticipating it was going to be, and it left a lot of room to come back and visit. So on one hand, it makes sense to make a sequel. From a business point of view, absolutely make a sequel because of its printing free money. All right, folks, listen. We've reached that part of the show for buy and sell. Here's how this works. In front of her, Erin's got a few other items in the world of movie news. She's going to run them down, and Amy Rose and I are simply going to say whether we buy it or sell it. So, Erin, what do we got?
There's some reports that X-Men Days of Future Past actress Ellen Page has landed the lead role in 20th Century Fox's adaptation of the graphic novel Queen and Country. The story is described like this. Follow British intelligence operative Tara Chase and her fellow Minders across countries and continents as she thwarts terrorist plots and protects the interests of her queen and her country. Page has also appeared in such films like Inception and was nominated for Best Actress at the Academy Awards in 2008 for her role in Juno. So, John, buy or sell Ellen Page being cast in the lead of Queen and Country?
I've got to sell it.
You don't like this?
No, I don't like this. And
I'm
I'll tell you what, I love her, okay? I love Ellen Page. She's a fellow good Canadian girl. Well, I'm a Canadian boy. But anyway, she was also born in the same city as me, by the way. We were both born in Halifax, Nova Scotia. I like everything about her. She was breathtaking in Inception. She was obviously great in Juno, getting her Academy Award nomination. You should see Hard Candy if you have not. She's just amazing. However, this is simply not a question of talent. For me, this is a question of fit. And when I think of badass, international spy, action thriller, blah, blah. I just don't see Ellen Page in that kind of a role. She doesn't. First of all, she's extremely petite. She's a very little girl, which makes her so perfect for so many of the things that she does. But this type of role, I don't see it as a fit. I'll go into it with an open mind and I'll give it a shot. But my advanced feelings on it is just I gotta sell it. What do you think, Amy Rose?
Yeah, for all the reasons you mentioned, that's exactly why I want to buy it, because I like Ellen Page. I think she's very likable, and I think she's good. But every single role I've ever seen her in, I still see Ellen Page in there. And I think this, I'm all about actors really being given the ability to flex their chops and try something we've never seen them in before. And this is what that feels like. Inception, sure, it was a little bit different than her Juno and other roles and Hard Candy. I mean, she's shown different sides, but I still see her in there, and she's never really done anything like this. And the content sounds really interesting to me. And, we've seen other people bulk up on little frames, so who's to say that she couldn't get in fit for this role? So I'd really like to see her really explore this angle, and I'm willing to give her the benefit of the doubt and see what she's made of.
I'm with you there. I kind of want to see her do this.
All right.
I'm excited. The new Daniel Radcliffe film, Horns, has made its debut at the Toronto International Film Festival to positive reviews, and a new clip of the film has hit the web. You can find a link to the clip in the video description below. Horns focuses on Ig Parrish, Daniel Radcliffe, the main suspect in the rape and murder of his girlfriend. He wakes one morning to find horns growing from his head, appendages that have the ability to force confessions from strangers and which aid him in his quest to find the real killer and exact his revenge. So, Amy Rose, buy or sell the look of Horns?
All right. So the first time I saw this, I'm gonna buy it, but when I first heard about this, I was like, what? It sounds like Pinocchio with horns, but a much darker take. And now the more I think about it in that clip, it just seems so obscure and interesting, and I like the obscure. I like when they have larger metaphors and philosophical meanings to weird obscure things like putting horns on your head. So yeah, and Daniel Radcliffe, The Woman in Black, he was really good in that film. It takes a real talent to act well in a scary movie when most of your co-stars are not there. It's a green screen and stuff. So I think he's a really good actor. I'm excited that he's pushing away from the Harry Potter cloak. And this sounds so obscure and weird. Sign me up. Let's see what's it all about.
I buy this. I think the story sounds really interesting. The clip I thought was really great. What's really interesting is hearing him not having his British accent. And hearing him trying to do the American. Now, I want to hear more of it to see if it sounds fake or not. But in the clip, it sounded pretty good. I think the horns look badass. I think the story's pretty cool. I disagree with Amy Rose on how, we both buy this clip. I thought he was dreadful in Woman in Black. I thought that was just a terrible movie overall. I didn't think he was very good in it. I think he's better. I think Daniel Radcliffe is better than what he showed in that movie. But I think Horns is going to give us a really neat look at him. This is very different from what we're used to seeing him in. I think the clip looks great, so for me, it's a buy.
All right. Well, a brand new red band trailer for the upcoming film The Family has hit the web. You can find a link to the trailer in the video description below. In the dark action comedy, a mafia boss and his family are relocated to a sleepy town in France under the Witness Protection Program after snitching on the mob. Despite the best efforts of Agent Stansfield, played by Tommy Lee Jones, to keep them in line, Fred Manzoni, played by Robert De Niro, his wife Maggie, played by Michelle Pfeiffer, and their children, Belle, who is Diana Agron, and Warren, John DeLeo, can't help but revert to the old habits and blow their cover by handling their problems the family way, enabling their former mafia cronies to track them down. So, John, buy or sell this trailer for The Family?
Buy it. I buy this red band trailer. I buy the green band trailer. I buy everything about this. This is a terrific cast. Obviously you got Robert De Niro, but that aside, I think Diane Agron, it's going to be neat seeing Agron trying to form herself and really get an identity in the movie world. She didn't do such a hot job in I Am Number 6. But maybe this can be a really great experience for her and a great, opportunity for her. And of course, who doesn't love Catwoman? The quintessential Catwoman. She is amazing. And by the way, just a quick note: if you still haven't seen Stardust and you want to see Michelle Pfeiffer almost at her best, go see Stardust. But yeah, this red band trailer adds a really good dark, violent element to what we've already seen in the green band trailer. So for me, it's nothing but likes all around.
Not to mention Michelle in Scarface. Talk about Babe Alert. She was so amazing that. I am really excited about this. Robert De Niro going back to the roots that made me fall in love with him in the first place. This just looks great. I love that they used the Gorillaz, Clint Eastwood, as the song, because I'm a big music head, and Gorillaz are awesome.
I love that song,
and
too.
Luke Beeson is great at this. I mean, The Fifth Element, I was a really big fan of, and Martin Scorsese is producing this, so all the elements form, and I like the idea of the family going undercover, and everything we've seen looks really good. So, yeah, I'm excited for it.
All right, folks, we've reached that part of the show for Mailbag. Listen, if you've got a topic or a question you would like us to address on the show, you can email us anytime at amcmovietalk@gmail.com. Every day we go through the mailbag and pick out a couple. Aaron's got a few of them picked out right now. So, Aaron, what do we got?
Well, our first question comes from JB. Thanks for sending this in. And he says, I just saw The World's End again and was laughing all the way through the movie. Just wanted to say that this movie is the funniest film I've seen in years, and it stands as a good action film, maybe one of the top action flicks this year. I'm wondering why consumers haven't been drawn to the film. Like Shaun of the Dead and Hot Fuzz, they both didn't make much at the box office, but they're consistent with the humor, themes, and even the music in the films are proper choices. Do you think it's a subtle humor that turns people off?
You bring up a great question.
Mm-hmm.
Why do some great films come out like A World's End? And I liked it very much. I'm not going to say it's one of my top 3 favorites of the year or anything like that, but I liked it very much. It's another solid outing by Frost, Pegg, and Edgar Wright, obviously. There could be another number of elements involved here. Number one, it is British. It is English, and not everybody's into English humor. Not everybody. And, you know, as much as a lot of us in certain circles really know Simon Pegg and love Simon Pegg and recognize him instantly, to a lot of people, he's still just that guy who plays Scotty in Star Trek, which is kind of unfortunate because he's much more than just that, even though he's completely amazing in Star Trek. Mm-hmm. But you bring up, this gets me onto something here. Forgive me if I rant on this just for a second. You bring up a great point. It's like we get great original films and that don't do great. I mean, even we just had Joseph Gordon-Levitt in our office, which reminded me of the fact that, you know, Looper came out last year, was a great film that nobody went to go see. Had big stars, you know, you had Bruce Willis, you got a great director in Rian Johnson, you got Joseph Gordon-Levitt in there. It's sci-fi action, very original, I mean, compared to what we normally see at any rate, and nobody goes to see it. This really irritates me a lot, especially when I hop on movie chat boards. And once again, forgive me if I go off on this for just a second, but I hop on these movie chat boards quite often, right? And say somebody will announce, oh, they're going to do another Hobbit film. Okay, and inevitably, what you will always see, whenever you see a sequel named or a remake named, you will see in some chat board some pretentious idiot who thinks they know something, who thinks they're sounding really smart by being the first guy ever to go, I guess Hollywood's run out of ideas. And they always think they're so smart when they say that. The reality is, you pretentious nit, is the fact that more feature films are made today than in the history of the industry, okay? Like over 900 feature films are going to be produced this year. Not all of them in every theater across the nation, not at all. But there are more films made every year, and there are more original films made every year than in any time in history. But that also means there's also more sequels and reboots and things like that as well. Okay, simple, right? Simple to understand? Yeah, apparently not. Because you still get these people who say, oh, we want more originality in Hollywood. Well, guess what? You're the same freaking idiot who won't go and support the original films when they come out in the first place. Because we get a lot of these great original films that do come out and nobody goes to see them. And then what do? The pretentious idiots who sit back and think they know something? They'll say, oh, it was the studio's fault for not marketing it properly. No, it's because you didn't go out and support it. Or because there wasn't a desire for it. Look, ultimately when it comes down to it, studios are in the business of meeting what the market wants. Mm-hmm. That's what they do. And when $700 million worth of people go and see The Amazing Spider-Man, that is the market telling the studios we want more Spider-Man, okay? When $1 billion worth of people go to see The Avengers, that is the market telling the studios we want to see more of this. But the opposite is true as well. When a movie like The World's End comes out and $21 million worth of people go to see it, that is a message the market sends to the studio saying, we're not interested, which is really, really unfortunate. But being the nits that we are, we think we're being really smart when we try to stick it to the man. That's really always the last resort of the week, is saying it's the man's fault. We try to say somehow it's the studio's fault. It's the studio's responsibility. No, it's the studio's responsibility to put out the things that the audience wants to see. That's what it's all about. And then studios take those huge multi-million dollars worth of profits, and then they do put out smaller, independent, and original films, hoping that we will go out and support it. And most of the time it doesn't happen. Sometimes it does. But this whole notion about, they're making it based off a comic book. There's no originality left in Hollywood. Oh, they're making it based off a novel. Oh, there's no originality left in Hollywood. Give me a break. Every story starts with a writer sitting down and writing a story. Doesn't matter if it's a screenplay, a comic book, or a novel. Every story starts the same. A writer sitting down and writing a story. Sometimes they make movies out of it. And sometimes they make original movies like World's End that people don't go out and support, and it's really frustrating. Anyway, that's my elongated answer to that. Amy Rose, you have a more positive outlook on this than I do?
John, I wish we were in the same room. I'd give you a big hug, buddy. You sound like you need it. Well, back to the original question. Why do we think movies like this don't do well? British humor is subtle sometimes. It's oddball, it's quirky. That's what I love about it personally. And for a film like this, The World's End did disappoint me. I still thought it was a good movie. I thought it was packed with a lot of, great characters and originality and an interesting story, but it did fall a little flat for me in the end. I'd say the last 30 minutes. They did wrap it back up, but yeah, it definitely, Shaun of the Dead I thought was a near perfect film. I loved that movie, and Hot Fuzz was great too, but this is definitely my least favorite of the trilogy, but I still thought it was good. I think a lot of people kind of felt that way. It started off really hot, and then the more people that saw it, people were like, yeah, it's good, but I feel like he's raised the bar so high for his trilogy that it did disappoint me because I went in with higher expectations than I like. But yeah, unfortunately, there's a lot of movies that we love that don't get a lot of eyeballs. One of my favorite movies of the year, Mud, Place Beyond the Pines. These are all movies that only gain steam with word of mouth after someone sees something really special in them. But if you look at their box office returns, they're not that high either. Most of the films that really speak to me like that don't make a ton of money. Unfortunately, that's just the way we're at. And I do agree, there's a ton of remakes and sequels and all of this that happens. But as you pointed out, there's a demand. A lot of people didn't want to see Mark Webb tackle The Amazing Spider-Man because we all felt that Sam Raimi did a really solid job with his trilogy. But it made a lot of money, and they're going to keep going. There's even 4 slated. So, there's a true thing to the market. It's supply and demand. And for British humor, The Office was a British TV show. There's a lot of those that they come over to the States, and, a lot of people will say, well, the British version was better, but, for the most part, some wouldn't even realize. House of Cards was a British TV show as well, and a lot of the times we steal from them, and then we put our Americanized spin on it, and that's what happens. So, yeah, there's a certain reality. Studios are not dumb. They, that I think we're seeing what's happening with Ben Affleck. He's making movies that are a little more indie in feel, but that they appeal to the wider audience. So the formula can match that. And him being Batman in the upcoming film, and then he'll get to do more of his passion projects. So there's a middle ground. So the studios know what they're doing. Put your money where your mouth is and support those films that you really want to see. And hopefully enough people do the same, that they'll keep making these original films. Because I agree, Edgar Wright's a great filmmaker.
Right on. One of the things I love so much about being on AMC is hearing the opinions of these amazing people, because I agree 100% of everything that they just said. And two of my favorite comedies, first of all, I love The World's End. This summer were To-Do List and Frances Ha, which also didn't...
I love To-Do List.
So good. So well written, too. I want to see more movies like that. I want to see smaller indie-type films do well. But as a consumer, you guys do have that power. So support the films that you want to see and the films that you want to see more of, because as John and Amy Rose said, it's a message that you're sending to the industry. So be sure to, put your money where your mouth is and see the things that you want to see more of. Our next question comes from Luis Santos, who writes, "Hey guys, love your show. Recently, John had said in one video that X-Men 2 was in his top 5 superhero movies. So that got me thinking, what are your guys' top 5 superhero movies and why?"
Amy Rose will give you the choice. You want to start this one off, or do you want me to start this one off?
It's up to you, my man.
Okay, why don't you lead us off, because I want to hear your list.
All right. So my favorite comic book film of all time.
No. Start at number 10. Or is number 5?
5.
Yeah, start at number 5.
My 5th favorite comic book film of all time would be X-Men First Class. I loved that film. I thought everything about it was fantastic. Matthew Vaughn's direction, Michael Fassbender as Magneto. I loved watching, the origin story, and sure, it had its flaws like every other film, being a diehard X-Men fan, but they showed the characters the way I wanted them to be shown, and I thought it was a really beautifully shot and great narrated story. Number 4, I have Man of Steel. Loved that film. I thought it was great. My issues were mainly with the script. Visually, I thought Snyder did a wonderful job. I thought Henry Cavill did a great job. All the actors across the board, really proud how they showed our last Son of Krypton. But my issues, being a writer, were with the script. So I'm hoping that Ben Affleck helps shape that as well for the next installment. Number 3, Iron Man. Robert Downey Jr. in the role he was born to play. 2 and 3 might have lost a little steam, but I still thought it was a pretty solid trilogy overall. But number 1, it's hard to get better than that. I mean, everything about it was incredible. I loved it. Number 2, The Avengers. Joss Whedon, I love the world he created. You can just tell he's a true fan. I loved seeing some of my favorite Marvel characters together, kicking ass on the big screen. I thought the casting was great. It was such a fun time. I was smiling ear to ear, loved it. And number 1 goes to The Dark Knight. Christopher Nolan remains one of my favorite, most visionary filmmakers. The Gotham that he created was so rich and complex and amazing, and he just brought the best out of Christian Bale and all the characters, and I just loved how they showed it. It was just amazing. My honorable mentions go to Thor, X2, and Spider-Man 2. There's so many other amazing films out there that were hard to go, but these are the ones that, for one reason or another, really, really stuck with me. So back to top, because I know you like to do that, John. 5, X-Men First Class. 4, Man of Steel. 3, Iron Man. 2, The Avengers. 1, The Dark Knight. Woo!
A great list, and a list that all of these films are in mine, but I cheated a little. I cheated. There are so many comic book films that I love, because now you're really in my wheelhouse, that I decided to do 10. So just like
I would have done 10.
Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't want to make you feel like you had to do 10. So I just decided to do 10 just as a cop out kind of a thing.
I had 3 honorable mentions, so I kind of did it.
Okay, fair enough. All right. So I'm going to do my top 10. Okay. Starting at number 10 will be Scott Pilgrim versus the World. Now, I just love what they did with this film. I was not looking forward to it. At the time that this film came out, I was really over Michael Cera, but it was a really pleasant surprise. I enjoyed it quite a bit. So number 10 for me is Scott Pilgrim. Number 9 for me is X-Men First Class. They just took one of probably my favorite prequel ever done. This will probably be my favorite prequel ever done. I was still a little iffy on all the stuff with the kids in the film. I thought that was the weak part, but anything that had to do with Xavier and Magneto and Sebastian Shaw, all that stuff was pure gold. So for me, number 9 is X-Men First Class. Number 8 for me is the film that resurrected the comic book genre, which is the original X-Men. Bryan Singer did what everybody thought at that point was just impossible to do, make a really great, publicly palatable, and yet pleasing to comic book fans as well movie. He did it. It came out incredible, and it started this whole avalanche of comic book films. For me, at number 7 is the original Iron Man. Once again, Robert Downey Jr. was such a revelation in this. He really, the charm that he brought, and, director Jon Favreau really knew what he wanted out of Robert Downey Jr., and together they just put together this amazing performance that really carried the film. Number 6 for me is going to be Thor. I saw this movie 8 times in theaters. 8 times I went back to the theater to watch it again and again and again. Kenneth Branagh was the perfect director for that film. He brought such a great narrative, a classic story about a father and sons. I thought it was great. I thought it was funny. The action was great. The visual effects were right on par. So for me, number 6 is Thor. Now getting into the actual question into the top 5. At number 5, I'm going to have Man of Steel. Still my favorite film of the year so far this year. I loved this telling of the story. I love that it was told really more of a storyteller kind of tale rather than a direct narrative. I did like the style of it. I thought Henry Cavill was a magnificent Superman. I love the visual effects. I love the action. I love the way it's just all told. I love the whole Mom Pa Kent thing about it. So for me, number 5 is Man of Steel. At number 4, The Dark Knight. Probably the single best villain we've ever had in a comic book film with Heath Ledger's The Joker. It's not just a comic book movie. It's also a crime thriller at the same time. More a comic book movie than a crime thriller. But it brought several genres into the comic book genre that shows you can mash these together and make it come out great. Number 3 for me is Spider-Man 2. My favorite of all the Spider-Man films, whether it's Sam Raimi's or Mark Webb's. The villain was great. It had so much heart and humanity to it. The action was exciting. It was just everything a comic book film should be. Number 2 for me, which will make number 1 completely anti-dramatic, but number 2 for me is X-Men 2, X-Men United. For a long time, I thought this was the best comic book film ever made. It's just, from a pure comic book fan point of view, it had everything you wanted. It was just, once again, the action's incredible. The narrative is great, memorable characters. And they found a way to squeeze in a lot of these auxiliary characters, like a Cyclops and stuff like that. Or not Cyclops, I mean Rasputin. Colossus, not Cyclops. I said Cyclops accidentally. But putting these characters like Colossus and others in there to make, just to please the fans without going too far overboard with the number of characters in the film. For a long time, I thought it was the best comic book movie ever made until last summer, and the Avengers came out. Avengers is one of my favorite films of all time now. Just a pure movie-going experience. I love this film to death. I don't know how many times I've watched it now on Blu-ray, and every time I never cease to giggle and laugh and jump up and down when Hulk starts smashing Loki and whatever. There's so many great memorable scenes, and really what Kevin Feige and Joss Whedon did with this world is just unbelievable when you consider the complexity that went into it. So that's mine. So running down my 10. Number 10, Scott Pilgrim vs. the World. Number 9, X-Men First Class. Number 8, X-Men. Number 7, Iron Man. Number 6, Thor. Number 5, Man of Steel. Number 4, The Dark Knight. Number 3, Spider-Man 2. Number 2, X-Men 2. And number 1, The Avengers. Aaron, what are some of your favorite comic book films of all time?
This is a really hard question for me, and I don't know the best way to answer it. I know that Man of Steel is in it. I know X-Men First Class is in it, but I have a lot of problems with a lot of X-Men movies because a lot of my characters get destroyed. I love Deadpool. Why did you guys ruin Deadpool? I love Gambit. Why does Gambit always suck, and why doesn't he have an origin movie? I love Cyclops. Why did you kill him?
And make him a wuss in the first place.
Because I have so many problems with X-Men movies, really, just because I really like X-Men. And there's a lot of movies I want to see that I think would be in my top 5 if they ever got made, like the Deadpool movie. But, that's a whole nother topic. But those are the 2 I know would be in it, and I think the others are just kind of rotating in there, and it kind of depends on what mood I'm in.
All right. Last question of the day.
Last question comes from Manny P, who writes, "Hey guys, love the show. My question is about directors. When a movie is bad, not just unsuccessful, but actually bad, how much of that is the director's fault? If he or she has a bad script, doesn't a director have some wiggle room to change things? Can you guys clear up the air, please? And keep up the great show."
Oh, thank you very much. Yeah, I've said for a long time, there's a pecking order. A lot of people who aren't involved in the film industry, whatever, they think, Robert De Niro's in that. That means it's going to be great. And, the pecking order, I think, for who is really most responsible for a movie being great or being bad goes director, writer, studio, actors. And they go in that order. The director is the buck stops here person. They are the ones ultimately sitting in the chair to make it go. Now, a lot of people will then, say, well, if the script is bad, it's like this. I remember listening to James Cameron talk once about directing in regards to like the Learning Channel home improvement shows. And it was a great analogy because this is what James Cameron said. Because somebody asked about, working with a bad script or working with a difficult studio or whatever. He said this, it's easy to be a contractor who's given a $10 million budget to go and fix up somebody's kitchen. That's easy. He goes, but wait, what's really tough is when you see these shows where these contractors get like, here's $2,000 to go and completely renovate somebody's kitchen. And you see that they have the skill. At the end of the show, they do the big reveal and the kitchen looks amazing. You can't believe it. He said, that's the responsibility of the director. You're responsible to take what you're given, whether it's an Academy Award level script with an unlimited budget, whatever, and make something great, or whether it's a mediocre script with some interference from the studio and you're under budgeted. It's still in your hands to go and make the best possible film you can. Now, that doesn't mean it's always the director's fault, completely the director's fault if a movie's bad. Doesn't mean the director should always just get all the credit if a movie's great. But when it comes down to it, the director is the man or woman sitting in that chair that has to make those decisions with whatever opportunities and hindrances that come along with that particular film. They're the ones who have to make it work. You know, we often have this debate a lot of times. I'll say X-Men or Spider-Man 3 was just a terrible film. And, you know, Raimi kind of crapped the bed on that one. Raimi's a great director. I love Sam. I think his Oz movie, by the way, shame on you folks who diss his Oz movie. I love his Oz movie. Anyway. I did too. Yeah, it's so good. Anyway. But also, yeah, I think he crapped the bed on that one, and that's okay. Everybody has a bad day at the office. Even Spielberg had the odd clunker or two. But people will say, no, John, it was the studio's fault because the studio made him put Venom in it. I'll go, okay, the studio made him put Venom in it. Then he should have taken that and made a great movie with Venom. Mm-hmm. Why didn't he take that direction he got and make a great movie with Venom? Because, you know, if the Avengers sucked, everybody could have come back and said, well, you know, it was the studio that made Joss Whedon put Black Widow in. Because Joss Whedon didn't put Black Widow in his script. He had Wasp. He wanted Wasp in Avengers. And the studio said, nope, not this time. Do this. So what did Joss Whedon do? Did he cry about it? Nope. And neither did Sam Raimi, by the way. But did he cry about it and say, no, they're making me take out my character? No, he said, okay, that's what I'm being handed. I'm going to make the best movie I can with what I'm handed. And he made The Avengers, what I call the #1 comic book film of all time. Amy Rose calls #2. So, I mean, ultimately, it really is the main responsibility of the director. Of course, there are other factors that come into play. Of course, you have to consider the script. Of course, you have to consider the producers. Of course, you have to consider the budget. Of course, you have to consider the source material. Absolutely. But the biggest of all that is the director. That's just the way I see it. Amy Rose?
Yeah, I mean, they are the man or woman at the helm, literally steering this picture for better, for worse, to where it ends up. And I definitely think, you know, one of the biggest key factors is how large of a pull and name they are. If they're an up-and-coming director, it might be in their contract that the studio has the final say or the cut or this or that. But if they're a name like Spielberg or Nolan or all of these who, you know, their creative control is their art, is their vision. It's so important to them. And they have now built an empire of their own where they can have more freedom. Then that becomes a little different a story. And, you know, as I mentioned in Man of Steel, I thought Snyder did a visually beautiful job. I thought the action sequences were awesome. I thought all of that was great. And as I mentioned, my issues were with the script, with some of the dialogue, with some of the decisions of that. And, you know, it really depends behind the scenes, like how collaborative of an environment it really is and like what is deemed in the contract. But, you know, the director is, as you mentioned, not the end all be all. I mean, there's a lot going on, but they are kind of shaping the overall vision. So depending on what your issue was, whether it be with the writing or the direction or this, you can kind of pinpoint maybe where your direct issue, where it stemmed from. But it is all of the components as a whole. And, you know, the director's name is usually the largest one on the film. So they get most of the praise. They also get most of the heat if it goes the opposite way. So I definitely think it depends on how large it is, what's written in the contract, how large the name is anyway, and what kind of property it is. I mean, if it's going to be, you know, a Mark Millar who's overseeing the DC universe with this, you know, like with Fox, with all their Marvel properties that they own, not DC. You know, it all depends on who's the godfather on that and all the other components if it's really a collaboration. But yes, in the end, it's the director's vision and they receive most of the praise if it's a great movie. So I guess the heat also falls on them as well. But there's a lot more than meets the eye and a lot of things we're never going to know about what was written into the contract and this and that and who has final say. But yes, the director is usually the strongest hold.
All right, folks. Well, that will do it for us. We have run out of time. Thank you so much for joining us on this episode of AMC Movie Talk. Listen, while I've got you, if you haven't done so already, make sure you take a second and click on that subscribe button. Become a subscriber to our AMC Movie News YouTube channel. It'll keep you up to date on everything going on in the world of movie news and, of course, our daily AMC Movie Talk show and our weekend AMC Mailbag show, which, yes, I am considering making that daily too, but I'll go into that later. Make sure you follow us on Facebook. Make sure you follow us on Twitter. If you'd like an audio-only version of this episode, look down in the description of this video where you'll find links to our iTunes and our Stitcher Radio. I want to thank, as always, first of all, our lovely host today, Miss Erin Darling. Erin, where can people find you online?
On Twitter, Erin A. Darling. YouTube, Erin Ashley D. Oh, took me a while to think of that one. Facebook, Erin Darling fan page. But I want to throw out my top 5 comic book. I thought about it a little bit more. My top 5 is X-Men First Class, Man of Steel, Kick-Ass, Spider-Man, Sam Raimi one, and The Avengers. There's my top 5. Sorry, I got ranty about that.
How did Kick-Ass not make it into my top 10?
I
gotta
love
think
Kick-Ass
about that.
so much.
The editor of movie news over here at AMC Movie News, Miss Amy Rose Eisenbach. Amy Rose, where can people find you?
Thanks, guys. At Amy Rosie, at Amy Rose Eisenbach. You seem to have no trouble finding me, so thanks for the love and support.
And you can find me on Facebook at John Campia AMC or on Twitter at John Campia. Thanks a lot for joining us, guys. My name's John Campia, and until next time, bye-bye.